Welcome to Unsolicited UX, a podcast full of advice and opinions that you didn't ask for. I'm Jay Keatsman, and each month I'll be sitting down with a professional from the world of UX, product design, and tech to dig into their work, their wins, and their lessons learned, so you don't have to. Whether you're deep in the trenches or just a little UX curious, there's something here for everyone. Check out Unsolicited UX on Substack, Spotify, and YouTube, and enjoy the conversation. Nancy Kumar, welcome to Unsolicited UX.
Thank you, Jay. It's my pleasure to be here.
Could you start by introducing yourself?
Okay. So maybe I would like to talk about my design journey with my introduction. So I am Nancy Kumar. I'm currently working with Airbus as a strategic design manager. Airbus manufactures aircraft, so obviously the business domain that I'm working in is around aircraft, services related to aircraft, digital solutions and services related to aircraft, and the businesses around. So those are my, let's say, current perimeter of work. Little bit about my past and my design journey. So by education, I am a designer. So I graduated with product design. I did my product design. After which I was working with Samsung for a little, I would say for a few years. And that was one of the companies I would say, that helped me to understand, let's say, because I was working on the flagship models of the Samsung that they were bringing on. So all the phones, and we had to come up with the new ideas of, what features could the phone really bring in, because at the end, these are catered to general public, and, all these phones needs to be like really attractive to the customers, to the people, right? So that's when, let's say I started applying what user centricity is. One is obviously about the problem solving, because we say user centricity, or being user centric is problem solving, but there's another delight factor of it also. So I tried understanding the delight factor. My education was mainly around the problem solving part, but that's when I understand the other side. Again, coming back to my design journey, I worked with Samsung. After that, I moved to Honeywell Aerospace. That's when my aviation journey started. So, I was, let's say, we were working on some solutions for pilot trainings. We were working on some solutions for aircraft maintenance, digital solutions, where you're capturing all the aircraft maintenance data, and then how maintenance engineers are really using those data. So there's few solutions around it. One major part for me, or I would say, this was one of the stages where I fell in love with the complexity that aviation really brings in as a whole business, as the whole system, as in it's not just about the complexity of the aircraft, but the whole system of the aviation and, aircraft. So that's what I really loved, and I realized the scope of design. What could really, what's the scope of design to really, get into it, and what can we really solve in this particular business. And after that, I was working with Boeing, as in obviously by choice, because I wanted to work in the same domain, in the same business. In between, I also took a break from my career. I was like, okay, let me do my masters. So I wanted to do it in a different country. So I moved to Italy. I did my masters in interaction design. I was in Milan. So I did, let's say, my masters there. And I continued back my, let's say, my work journey in aviation again. So I was at Boeing, and then now currently I'm with Airbus. So again, the reason that I am working with all these companies are my love for aviation, and I'm just, the more about. So it's good to see how different aviation companies are working, and, what's the role of design inside those organizations, to see, what, we can really play a very big role, and it's just to start there. So yeah, that's pretty much about me.
So you've worked with 3 different aviation companies?
Right.
In your experience, how similar or different is the design process?
It was very different. So, the way you practice design in any organization really depends on how mature the organization or the company is in design. And there are different levels of design, if you see. So one is design just as a deliverable, where you're just making, giving the output, you're just designing few screens, and I'm purely talking from the digital design world perspective. So, where you're just giving the deliverables, you're just producing the deliverables. The second part is where design thinking, or, the user centric approach, or the double diamond method, or, the problem solving approach that we call, is part of the business. So, let's say if I'm working on one particular business, design is literally given the importance at that level. And, whenever you're interacting with customers, whenever you're taking some major decision, it is thought from the user perspective. So that's one level of design. And the third level of design is where, let's take an example of Apple. We call it as a design centric company, right? So the reason being is it's from top. So there, let's say, it is consistent everywhere. They have, let's say, design languages. Any of the products they have some, similarity between them and all the stuff. So that is where we call it as, a design centric company, where all the strategic decisions and anything related to design and the user experience flies, or let's say flows down from top, something of that sort. So it completely depends on the organization. So my experience has been very different, because different companies were mature, and they were, mature, and the way they were practicing design were very different. But yeah, as in, I don't know what details are you expecting, but yeah, the experiences were different.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's more about the organization than, because I think I was just thinking I think the assumption would be that an airline would approach design similarly because it's a similar, it's the same industry. But if you think about any industry, the job is very different from company to company. Right?
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. The business goals are different, right? So they accordingly think and they accordingly make their strategies. So yeah.
But when you went back into your master's program, did you have it in the back of your mind that you wanted to stay in aviation?
Oh yeah, I did. I did because see, when I started with Honeywell, one good thing was, and this was back in 2000, I would say 12 or 13 or something like that. So UX design, interaction design, UX research was very new to the market back then, or a few companies were already practicing it, and Honeywell was doing it, and that's when I realized, let's say, if this is literally driven from top, right? We were actually doing at a project level. We were trying to be more, let's say, user driven kind of mindset. But then not every company was really following back then, right? And that's when I thought, okay, using this process into a complex world, as in that's the whole intention of being design centric, user centric, right? Solve the complexity, make it simple. And that's what we're supposed to do. So this is a right place, or it has that opportunity to solve. So that was my personal interest, I would say. Of course, as in, I did not think of, is the organization mature or not, or how are they working currently. For me, it was, I was enjoying the business. I knew the technicalities of the aircraft little bit, not much. I sort of knew a little bit of the businesses that were happening around, let's say, aircraft. Is it airline industry, is it some other, let's say, industry associated stakeholders? So I was enjoying that bit, so I was sort of clear. Yeah.
And what are some of the different focus areas of aviation from a design perspective? Because you have the airplane, which is a physical design, but then you have a lot of complex technology, I assume, or I hope. But then you have the relationship between the airplane and the center. I don't know the terminology, but the control center.
Mm-hmm.
And then it may even reach out further than that. So can you talk a little bit about like how you manage the complexity of aerospace?
Yeah, okay. That, in fact, that's a very good question. If somebody wants to really deep dive into, how this industry works, and how and where design is really integrated into it. So, as you said, aircraft is, the center entity. That's what we can consider over here, because as Airbus, as Boeing, these are aircraft manufacturing company. So their main ambition is to manufacture aircraft and then sell the aircraft, right? So that's the center, let's say, entity. Now, when you do that, there are a lot of services, first of all, that needs to be created to make sure that the aircraft is flying well, or to make sure that you're reading aircraft data well, so that you know that the health of an aircraft is good, or there are multiple things around it, right? So that is where you need all this digital solution. So there are multiple services, first of all, that created around the aircraft to maintain the aircraft, to make it fly properly, to know what's the health status of an aircraft, who is operating the aircraft, how are they flying the aircraft, whatever. So these are everything related to the data of an aircraft and services around it. The second part comes in what I think you were trying to ask was, let's say there's a cockpit, right? So there's a cockpit used by pilot. So today the cockpit is it's mainly very physical. It has all the touch controls and all those stuff. That's where a slight let's say opportunity for a designer that comes in. So if I don't know if you're aware, there was a role called human factors that that exist or used to exist quite a lot few years back, not few years but few decades back actually, which were responsible to look at the human aspect of it inside an aircraft, right? Is the, let's say, flying conditions right? Are the controls placed properly? There are multiple aspects towards it. And slowly, if you think from that particular logic, that is where the user experience design is also connected. So that is another area. If you look at the physical aspect of it, that okay, this is the aircraft now. There are a lot of futuristic tech coming in. There are a lot of physical buttons getting converted to digital controls, buttons, screens rather. So how do you translate that? And let's say you must have heard of, let's say, a lot of our cars are getting converted to digital panels instead of the physical controls. But there are still people not very convinced, because while driving it might not, until unless you have that feel of the knob of, let's say, of any of the button, you're not sure that have you done it right or something of that sort. So there's still debate going on, till what level do you need to take the tech ahead and keep few things as is, because based on the user experience or the ease of using while you're maybe flying or driving, whatever. So this is in the context of flying. So that's one another area where the simulator part of it, the cockpit design part of it. The other part of it is, as let's say you as a passenger, the passenger experience part of it, the entertainment unit you have, there are other aspect of it. So there is another set of, let's say, that's another, I would say, business or something. So this is mainly from the airline side. So what kind of seating it would be, what kind of interaction points are you giving for the user to spend their time, especially if it's a long haul airline or flight or something of that sort. So those kind of things. So that's one aspect of it. As in, this is all related to the aircraft now. When the aircraft is being sold, from, let's say, to Airbus, to some other companies, and when airlines buy it or lease it from the leasing companies, again, there are multiple things about an aircraft that needs to be shown, that doesn't need to be shown, depends on the health of an aircraft. A lot of time what happens, people are happy to buy new aircrafts, but then the more old it is, there are more, let's say, maintenance activity that goes on to the aircraft, right? So there are a lot of services and solutions around it, which, let's say, recommend you in advance or suggest you in advance, in terms of, okay, your aircraft is, let's say, this part is getting old, you need to replace it, so that it's good for flying. It is some other companies, if it's a leasing company who's planning to sell the aircraft, the aircraft is in good condition, something of that sort. So there are multiple opportunities and services that could be really created around it. So I just touched upon it. And there's another aspect of airport, the operations of a flight to start, as in, from beginning till it takes off. There is an ATC unit, so air traffic controller unit in the airport, that usually sits, who does the communication part, the navigation surveillance part. There are multiple, that's what, there are too many stakeholders associated to it. Each and every stakeholders has an opportunity where they need a digital solution, digital services, where they can make better, informed decisions, make a better decision making or something of that sort with the data. So yeah.
That seems incredibly complex to,
Yeah.
but I imagine how many design teams are there at Aerobus? Probably many.
Yeah, so basically, as you heard, there were different as in different areas that I spoke about. So similarly, there are different functions across Airbus. If there's a cockpit team who's separately sitting there, just working on the cockpit part. If, let's say, if there is somebody who's interacting with airlines, let's say if airlines need some sort of digital solutions or something of that, so they're just talking to the airlines. There are multiple, let's say, customer bases, and there are multiple products that's being made, and they're literally catering to those particular things. So there are multiple teams, actually, in short.
Yeah. And before you were focused in on aerospace, you worked for Samsung.
Yeah.
So what was the experience like transitioning from working with telecommunications into aerospace?
Uh-huh. So I think one major difference was just about the business that you're working in, because the whole let's say the lens changes for you. So basically there, as I told you, I was mainly looking into the delight part of it. And you have to be little novel in terms of whatever ideas you're giving in, because there's a huge competition outside, and that's the business for Samsung, right? You have to be creative, you have to be new, because that's when people are going to buy it or use it, something of that sort. And of course, as in they had to keep up themselves in terms of tech, because again, phones are the most, let's say, fast changing product ever today. If you see in the market, the life cycle of the phones have really reduced. So that's where you need a regular, let's say, you have to regularly keep updating yourself. You have to be up to date in terms of tech, whatever solutions you're proposing. So that was one aspect of Samsung. Versus when I come to aviation is a very different world altogether. As in, it's about what is really going on, because one is we cannot disturb the current setup of the manufacturing of an aircraft and the flying of aircraft, because
Right.
safety of an aircraft is the most critical thing. So you cannot really touch any of those. Now the only ambition is to make these operations better, smoother, with less time, right? As in, technically a lot of those processes were manual. People were still referring to a lot of physical papers. There were a lot of aircraft data which was still physical papers, and aircraft records which were, as in fact still today they are in physical records. So we are slowly trying to digitize all those stuff, because the more digital it is, the more we'll have more control over the data and more visibility of the status of anything that's happening around the business. So it was mainly from the perspective of what business needs, what the user needs. By user, I mean the stakeholders inside. And obviously everything was related to aircraft. So how can we make anybody in the stakeholder make their life better? So that was the overall approach, and bring in more businesses, of course. That's the basic for any company. So yeah.
So I'm always intrigued by the relationship between priorities within the design or the user experience team and business stakeholders. And so I'm curious about this priority of delight at Samsung and what kind of potential negotiation there was between business stakeholders and the priority of delight. Or maybe there wasn't, but I'm just curious in that topic.
So in Samsung, I would say there wasn't much, because delight was already a priority. In fact, in Samsung, the let's say the fight was between the feasibility and the delight. So as a designer or as a design team, we technically, the way we are supposed to think is like, we should not be restricting our minds, and just feel free to think about anything, irrespective of how the crazy idea would sound like. But then technically that's the role of designer, because that's when at least ideas are born. The next step is the feasibility aspect of it, right? So usually it was the fight between the tech and the, let's say, the idea. So business was not an issue back there. It was, I would say, mainly in the aviation sector, because you had to really prove the value of, why do you want to talk to the user, or, why do we need that real pain point of the user? Because a lot of time we just get a voice of customer from the sales, right? Oh, there's somebody had said this, they need a solution, something around this. But then why is it that? How is it impacting their life? Is there anything, is there any other thing that is also impacting that particular person's life? So this is where we need some time to conduct some researches, or conduct some user interviews or whatever. And that is where I think the challenge is to, why do we need to do that? And this is a constant, I would say, fight that happens.
I wonder if too there's an element there that like the airline industry, I mean, relatively speaking, is an older industry. And so it may be more grounded in like a level of tradition and
Yeah,
safety, right? There is definitely a functional element there that is high risk.
that's true. Yeah, it is.
But I still kind of want to ask about this delight topic for a second. Like, can you maybe elaborate on, first of all, like maybe even what did delight mean at the time, or like how did you discuss it? And then what kind of pushback were you experiencing? Because it makes sense to hear that like maybe engineering or the technical team would push back on ideas that seem infeasible. That makes sense. But I'm just curious about in an industry that was fast paced and trying to innovate or trying to come out with this new idea, new concepts. What was that like?
Um, One thing I could say for sure is at least being working as a designer. One very good thing about it was you had to be really updated with whatever is going on in the market in terms of the trends, in terms of the tech and everything. The second part was again, I think that's what you asked, what is that delight thing for the user? Because there is no defined pain point for it, and there's no set of design thinking method that we'll follow to come up with some idea, because it's a very vague or very generic thing to really to do or rather think about. So that was a constant challenge for us. A lot of time we were said that, okay, you have to come up with some ideas, and I'll give you an example. Let's say we are working on a camera application. It's just a random example. So we are working on mobile camera. Okay, now imagine if you're given a task of you have to think about better ideas. How can you make it I don't know, again, let's say you have to add a delight factor over there, let's say. So as in it's a very vague thing, as in a delight for one could mean something else, a delight for second person could mean something else. But then this is where I think this also becomes a playground in a digital industry, where there are a lot of releases, there are a lot of version updates that keeps coming, right? And this is where companies are coming up with multiple ideas, testing it out. If it's working, if people are responding well, they keep it, otherwise they remove it or something of that sort. So that's what, as in, you just have to keep on thinking, iterating, and then do it. So yeah, of course the feasibility has to be taken care, but yeah.
And your current job title is strategic. Is it strategic manager or strategic design manager? Okay. I'm kind of seeing a through line here. Would you say that this experience at Samsung sparked your interest in what led to your current role?
Not really, I would say. Because see, for me, as I told you, when I moved to Honeywell, right, it was mainly the business, or the domain. It was the complexity that this business was bringing in. And I think before that we also spoke about every company works very differently, because it depends at what design maturity level they are in. So coming back to your question about this title, Airbus, the way they have positioned this particular team, and the way they had they have planned the roles of different, let's say, skill set, was that, as in it, the design was placed as equal to, let's say, tech and the business. And that is where I could say it was design driven or user driven innovation method that we were trying to follow. So it is not just that, okay, you have some business goal, and now people need to start working towards it. Why do we had that business goal? Or before coming to the business goal, it was decided together with the analysis that all three of us, as in the tech expert, the business expert, and the design expert, we do that together to come up with a problem statement or anything that we are trying to create. So yeah.
Okay, so I want to ask about that, but I think before asking about that, can you just tell me what your current role means to you? Like, what does it mean to be a strategic design manager?
Okay, yeah, that's a fair question. So the word strategic, right? I know it is not very common, which is there out there in the market, but what it really means is a designer, let's say a design expert, who is looking at a problem statement from the business level. A lot of time designers look at a problem statement from the product level, right? But we are looking at the business level. So we know who are the customers. Now the point is, okay, what are you trying to solve for that customer? So there, let's say, as I told you, we get some VOCs from a sales team that, okay, this is what the customer is saying. But a lot of time they are not the user, right? They are, let's say, the person who are the decision makers of the company or whatever. So this is where being user centric thing comes into the picture. Like at the business phase, where you're looking from a, let's say, holistic view or from the top view, you start looking at the problem from the user perspective. That, okay, if the VOC is saying this, does it mean, are you catering to this particular person or this particular user? How is it getting impacted to him or her? Are there more personas getting impacted in parallel? Because you're having a holistic view, right? You're not just having a product view. So this is where the word strategic comes into the picture. So the decision making or the finalization of what are you trying to solve, or whatever you're trying to make, it is from the business level first. It is not at the product level, and you're having a holistic view to it. So that is why you say you can call it as a strategic design role.
And when
the
you said the VOC, is that voice of customer?
Voice of customer, yeah.
And that's like a cohort of users that your company often engages with to understand the needs of clients?
So technically, as in what you said is right, but then we also refer it to, let's say, when our sales folks or other people who are very closely working or talking to our customers, they hear some feedback, right? And they capture all those feedbacks. So we just call them as VOC. Ideally, it is supposed to be like when you're working on a product or something like that, we conduct research and then we call it as VOC. But this is another way also we use that term. So yeah.
Sort of like funneling in multiple channels of customer or client feedback. So, okay. Yeah. And then you use that sort of as a guide to prioritize, to then dive deeper. Okay. That's great. Okay. So then you said that the way things are positioned at Aerobus are that you have sort of these three pillars, the business, the tech, and the design, that are treated like equal partners in this sort of establishing priority business problems or problems to address. Can you talk about what that's like a little bit? Because I think often in conversations I have, people are striving for that kind of cross-functional, maturity, but it's difficult to achieve. So I would love to just hear, if it's successful, how you got there.
Yeah, that's again a very good question, because I really understand, because there are a lot of teams and companies or designers who are really struggling to be there. And that's why I said there are three levels of design. I would say we are at the mid level, where at least we are able to make those decisions from the business level and not at the product level. So the way it is, one good thing I would say was when this team was getting formed, right? They had very, let's say, clear process defined and clear roles defined. Because again, the famous innovation concept you must have heard of, desirability, viability, feasibility, we were just strictly following that. And desirability is what exactly a designer is supposed to look at, right? And desirability is exactly what it means is what your users desire for, or how do you make your solutions more desirable. So until unless your solutions are desirable, until unless you really validate that, maybe the business impact that's going to come on is less, as in it's not very good. So it is something, that's why we need to work on together. So if I talk about our current ways of working in terms of how do we work as a squad and all three experts, the way we work, it is usually that because it's an innovation team, as I said. So I would say we co-create with our customers. So we very closely work with our customers. Okay. And so by these customers, what I mean is, I mentioned about VOC, right? So a lot of time when we get these VOC from a sales team or some insights from a sales team that, okay, this particular customer, wants this kind of solution or something like that, they would be interested into it. And that's when we try to onboard them with us, that, okay, are you willing to, let's say, co-create with us? We'll help you to create the solutions, but we would need a regular feedback from you to help us, to mature the idea, to mature the solution. And that is where once we have, so I'm purely talking of the design side, the desirability side. So once we have confirmed, let's say, some customers who have onboarded with us, who are onboarded with us on the topic, similarly, we do this set of activities with 2 or 3 more customers, because we need some sample size of, what the market could look like. And then whatever you're making need to scale in the future, right? So that's why we, let's say we have on an average between 2 to 4 or 3 companies who get onboarded with us, who agree to get onboarded with us, who have a similar set of pain points or needs. And once they agree on it, we start with our, the typical design thinking process that we follow. So, the definition of what is that area we are trying to solve. And then, we start with our research activities and all the stuff. So this is mainly on the design side. Parallelly, what happens is, let's say if it is a high level business, if we know the tech with me knows what capabilities that we have within our company, do we have this tech available, do we have the data available, or something of that sort. So obviously the person is there with us to evaluate all those stuff, so that we make sure that whatever idea we work on, it should not happen that, oh, tomorrow it's not feasible, right? We have to make sure
Right.
that we are on the right path. And similarly, on the business side, obviously we are talking to 3 or 4 customers, but does it reflect the rest of the market? Does it reflect the rest of the market size? Is that problem still there outside in the market? Because tomorrow, if we make a solution, if nobody else is going to buy apart from these 3 or 4 customers, then again there's no point to it. So validating all those stuff, what's the revenue look like, what's the value will look like to the product, all those stuff is done by business. We work on this together along with our customers. We co-create, we ideate, there are multiple iterations that happens. We very closely interview them, do some shadowings, all those stuff, define, come up with a, let's say, idea. Then again, in terms of validating what the flow should look like, how are the interaction points and all the stuff, we define that. Then the design gets converted, as in all the insights gets converted to design. And then, yeah, I think that after that, it's passed on to the development team for the development. So that's how it is. And at the end, we do the testing just to, evaluate if the experience is right, if the usability is correct and all those stuff, to at least get, that point of view that, okay, the product is usable, the product is working fine, there's no lag, or there's, the data, whatever we are displaying is correct and all those stuff. So yeah, that's in short how we are working. Yeah.
And would you consider this to be, would you use the term innovation lab?
You can call for sure, because we are working on one particular business segment, right? So technically, but yeah, it's not an innovation lab for sure. As it is not an open innovation lab where we are working on any of the different, let's say, businesses or functions. We are obviously catered to one particular business or one function. Obviously, it's a corporate setup, so everybody has a defined goals and working setup. So yeah, we are working for this particular thing, but it's not an open one. So we are looking at the business. So we are open to ideate on any of the ideas, or any of the problem statement to work on, but related to this particular business segment.
Okay. And so does each business segment have their own designated innovation team?
Yeah. As in we have the squad concept over there. So every dedicated businesses have the squads, and the associated teams in terms of development, they have the sales representative and other folks there.
Yeah, because you're not focusing at the product level, right? You're focusing at the business level. So this is happening very early.
Exactly.
And then at some point moves into a product team.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So how would you say that this innovation team concept that you're on, does that differ from product discovery?
From product discovery, can you just elaborate more on that? What exactly do you mean by product discovery?
Well, I'm just curious because this team seems to be very early in the process and almost pulled, like, it's embedded within a business. What did you call it? A business line, like but it's not embedded within a product specifically. So you're working on key. I guess let me ask: are you working on key strategic initiatives for the business line?
Yes, exactly. That is what it is. Yeah.
And so, do the product teams also run their own discoveries in terms of trying to establish priority? Like I guess, how do I ask this question the best way? Do you own the strategic and early concept phase of every project, or just key initiatives?
So again, particularly related to this particular business vertical, we do. So basically, we are, let's say, we are giving birth to ideas. So that is what we do. And then we have the teams who take over from us. So, and they are the ones who are, let's say, making or scaling the product. And of course, they do follow a similar method of, talking to customers, gathering the insights. But we are literally, the machine of coming up with new products or new product ideas, and then, giving it to the team, and we hand over to them to make it in the run mode. So, yeah.
So what does a typical output look like for your team?
So it's usually we work, we make an MVP. so minimum viable product. So which validates that, okay, we are targeting right market, which validates our users are really using it and they really need this. So, from the usability part, from the need part, the desirability part. So at least it addresses certain segment of the market, right? Because we onboard some customers, as I told you, but we just don't do it by ourselves. It is from the feedback that our customers are giving. So validate that. The tech is obviously validated, because at the end, whatever ideas we come up with, if it is not feasible, there's no point. In whole process, obviously we collect a lot of other ideas too, which helps, let's say, if the product is going to some other team, the MVP is going to some other team for scaling up, we have the backlog available with us. We create the backlog which helps them to scale and make the product more robust for future. Yeah, but we deliver MVP.
Okay. And then connecting it to you mentioned the double diamond concept earlier.
Yeah.
Is there a certain point in that process that your outputs typically land and then the product teams sort of start? Or do the product teams have their own sort of double diamond process once they pick up the project?
That's again a good question. So what happens is, you must have heard of this typical agile method and frameworks that a lot of development teams are using. So there are different teams who are using different frameworks in their teams. Majorly, you can say it is scaled agile framework that the teams are following. So what happens, framed agile is a very mature process for development, because they have everything in place in terms of what each and every individual does. But from design aspect, it's not very mature. That's my personal, let's say, feedback or point of view. So what we recommend is that design, let's say, by design I mean, it could be the requirement gathering part, or it could be, let's say, the designing part in itself, that happens few sprints ahead of the development, which means that it gives the designer and the product owner, product manager, gives that time to explore, to really look into whatever feature you're coming up with makes sense. So do the evaluation, do the research, finalize it, have all the justifications ready, and that's when design the final, let's say, mock-up before you really give it for development. So this activity, we are trying to embed that into the agile framework, I would say.
Yeah, that's I think that's great though, because what I'm hearing is that you have a team designated with the first pass, and then you have another team that almost validates or iterates on the work that your team did to further refine the quality of the output and the desirability, meeting the feasibility, meeting the user's needs, etc.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That's
great. Okay, so again, I kind of want to stick around this topic of innovation because I think it's a bit of a buzzword, but it's everyone's. I think most people in our industry dream of doing real innovation or having some kind of impact, however you want to define that. But I'm curious from your perspective, being on a team that actually prioritizes strategic projects that are meant to innovate. What does innovation mean to you?
That's a good question. So I know it's a buzzword, and it sounds very fancy, but if you look, or just see the reality of it, for me, what innovation really means is, I'm talking from being very practical perspective, as in I might have two different definition as a designer versus a designer who's working for a corporate company. So here I'm talking
Share
from a
both.
perspective.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay. So the first part, where a designer who's working for a corporate company, what it really means is that coming up with a solution or with an idea which does not exist today. So, it need not be very fancy. It need not be, using any of the latest tech or trends or something like that. So that is what at least innovation means. But as I said, the other Nancy, or the other designer Nancy, who's not connected to any of the corporate world, for her it could mean, oh, we have so many latest trending, tech coming in. Let's say, we have all the AI in picture now, generative AI and all this stuff, right? So how do we really use that? Or let's say we had this virtual reality, mixed realities in place. How can we use those technology in the user's context, and all those stuff. So that is where I feel innovation lies. How do you make the user centricity marry the tech, and that is where the design is there. So that is innovation for me, the for other Nancy. But yeah, I will stick to my first definition of what it means is, anything that does not exist today and which is new and novel is innovation. Yeah.
The employed Nancy has a much more pragmatic definition, right?
Right.
So, but you're alluding to it, but then I want to ask, like, do you think innovation is always sexy?
It's the output is sexy, I would say, for sure. The process is not at all, because you have to go through all the ambiguity, because innovation is always very, you have no clear definition, and a lot of time you don't even know what you want to land for. Maybe you have a little bit of requirements, or maybe let's say a pain point, but you never know what the output could look like. And I keep saying this, that the innovation need not be just a digital solution. It could be a practice, it could be a process, it could be a service, it could be a physical service, it could be anything. It is just about solving that particular problem statement. The output could be anything. So yeah.
Your starting point is a problem statement. How do you typically get to the problem statement? Like, what comes before?
What comes before is the user. So or before that, what comes is the customer, because a lot of time people use customer and user at the same level, and so it's very important for people to understand our customers are not users. Most of the time, there could be only few cases where customers can be users, but at least in this particular context they are not. So first is try and understand that. The second pain point, as the second point is not the pain point, that who is the user, identifying the right set of persona. Because we very vaguely or generically talk about some profiles, but how are they really working in their real life? A lot of time, when we work with different companies, there might be a similar role. I'll again take an example of designer. So few company has a researcher role, UX designer role, and a UI designer role. But one company has, the other company has, I don't know, a product designer role, which does all the three jobs, right? So the user journey for these particular personas will be different, right? But then when you're working on solution, you have to cater to both of these persona types. So basically, you have to think from that perspective, that when you say one persona, what are you exactly talking about? So who is that target audience? What all activity that he or she does is what you need to. So identifying that is a task. It can be a group of profiles, it can be one single profile, so it depends. So identifying that, I think, is a key, I would say, issue. Once that's identified, I think we have line of problem statements, everything, the journey maps, everything there. I think then it's pretty easy to follow at least the process. So yeah.
And how long is a typical project for your team?
So it's little less than a year, I would say. It's approximately 9 months or something of that sort. It also depends on the nature of project, but that's an approximate time, I can say. Yeah.
So for a lot of people, I mean, sadly, for a lot of people, a year timeline is actually a pretty long-term timeline. It shouldn't be, but I think for a lot of teams and a lot of companies, that is a long timeline to commit to. So I guess, how do you navigate shifting business priorities with long-term timelines?
See, at least I could talk about from Airbus perspective. One good thing over here is, as in, we give some time to whatever work we do. We validate it. So basically, there's we validate whatever we do it very thoroughly, so that we are sure that what we are doing. So we are not in a situation where we just have 3 months or something like that. Though there are certain situations, I'm not saying that we have a very rosy life over here. There are situations like that, but then it's mainly about what are you trying to achieve? That's the main question. As in, I think that's a question everywhere in life. You need to know what are you trying to solve or do. So until unless that's clear, and if everybody agrees, I don't think there is any problem in terms of achieving that one single ambition for everyone, be it a tech or business or design. But then once that is confusing, or let's say one particular team has a bigger ambition in terms of the vision that one particular person has is very different from what the other person is thinking, that's where the problem arises. So if we have a clear vision of the business or the product, it's easy, and accordingly timeline and everything could be managed. So yeah, that's pretty what it is. Yeah, pretty much.
Has your team ever had to bail on a project because of what you learned along the way?
Not really, I would say. Not really. I don't know. Do you see? Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say that's good then, probably.
As in, I was trying to understand. Do you have any particular situation that you want to look asking for, or do you have anything in mind in specific?
No, I just think again, I think that committing to long-term planning is probably a lot of UX professionals' dream. And so hearing that you're on a team that's consistently producing year-long outcomes, solving real problems, at this level of maturity cross-functionally, I'm just curious to, hear, hoping for a negative. No, I'm kidding. No, I was just curious.
No, of course, as in, I would say there are certain situations. It's just about expectation management between sales, between customers, between the development teams and all this stuff. So I would say it's still manageable, or we have managed. There are no major hard decisions being made as of yet. So yeah, it's fine.
And let's say someone's listening and they're like, oh, I think that my company should implement this process of having an innovation team out front cross-functionally to take the first pass that then passes it along to a product team that does this sort of refinement process. And then this is my take on it. Maybe I'm not correctly articulating the work, but let's say someone wants to do that. What do you recommend to them? What kind of advice do you give to, how do you pitch it or showcase its value?
One thing, as in whatever your articulation was 100% correct, first of all. So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, as in one advantage that I see in this process is that, we are taking care of, and this might be, case to case basis, business to business basis, it might vary. But if talking about this particular industry, the aviation industry, a level of expertise is needed, right? So we are actually making best use of expertise in the let's say the expertise or the skill that particular person bring in versus the knowledge in the business, right? So because it's a combination of that, as in it's not enough for anybody just to know about the design, right? It is also for the person to understand what the business is and to have that business maturity. So that is where, as in and as I said, it is placed not on a product level, it is placed on the business level, right? So having, let's say, few senior folks placed there, they have the visibility of business and their particular, let's say, skill set, whatever they bring in to the team. That's like the best combination that you can bring in, and they're making the decisions for and they have the view of the outside world versus what can go inside. So I really feel this setup is really nice in terms of using the best out of what you can bring in from what people can bring in from the skills and experience perspective. So yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any resources that you turn to that you would suggest others turn to if they want to get started with this kind of process? I'm thinking IDEO, you mentioned design thinking, anything like that?
So by resources, do you mean set of processes or?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Okay. See, as in, I don't know. For me, I try to think it in a very simple manner. We have a design thinking method. Now you can apply it anywhere at any level. You can apply it at company level, you can apply it business level, function level, or you can apply it product level. So it's as simple as that. So technically, everybody knows what design thinking is. Keep it simple and just try to apply. Look from the problem perspective or the idea perspective, and then you'll just have everything in place. So as in, that's how I like thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't overthink it.
No. Yeah. Because I feel the process needs to be simple. Once the process is simple, irrespective of how the complex the products are or the business is, if the process is simple and clear, it's easy. It's easy to execute, it's easy to work.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think people make arguments that processes slow things down. But I love processes because they provide guardrails that keep
Exactly.
you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
See, that's what I'm saying. You not necessarily you need to stick to the process 100% time, but as you said, they provide guide rails. And especially when people work together, everybody has
Hmm.
their ways of working, everybody has their perspective. It's better that we stick to these guide rails, and it's okay if few of them deviates, and it's okay if all of us deviate together, but we will do it together, right?
Yeah.
So it's needed for sure.
Right, right. Okay, so I have just two questions left for you
Mhm.
today. The first being, uh, what is a UX or work related opinion that you might hesitate from sharing in a meeting?
UX or work related opinion. Okay, and I would hesitate sharing in a meeting. So who is there in the meeting? That depends.
I think it's whatever comes to mind. Just like things that maybe you think but don't share because I don't know. I don't even want to put too much. I don't want to put guardrails on it. No, just like a controversial opinion, maybe, or something you think is controversial.
Yeah, okay. So a lot of time, one aspect of design is, of course, apart from solving the pain points, looking at the customer, user, their journey, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes it is also important to make things appealing or design things appealing, because that's the first look of product. I hate saying that, but because once you start saying that as a designer, that, oh, I make things beautiful, that's what the whole world would start saying too. As in, because that's what people perceive design as. We have been constantly trying to push that, oh, we are much more beyond that, but inside I know that's also important somewhere because that's the first look of the product. So yeah.
Yeah. And that's super valid because psychologically there is the
Exactly.
idea that if something is aesthetically pleasing, there's a perception that it works better, right? Like I think there's a psychological principle around that. So it's a bit
Exactly.
of a chicken or an egg thing. Like, does it work
Exactly.
better, or do you just think it works better because it's aesthetically appealing?
Right. Absolutely right. Yeah.
So you can defend that with psychology.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Okay, last question is a question from a mentee. And what they said was, I sometimes doubt that my work is having real impact. Can you give me advice on how to be more impactful at work?
Hmm. Okay. Um. So, again, what does impact mean to a person? Is it, but as in, again, that could vary. But for me, I'm assuming it's a designer who maybe who's not satisfied with the work he or she is producing, or maybe it's not being visible or recognized by the person, because that's what, the impact at the end, every designer would see. As in, technically, the other, let's say the tech team or the product team coming back to the person appreciating, let's say, few features or something, and if nobody's really responding to them, or there's nobody saying anything, I'm assuming people are not either appreciating or acknowledging whatever work has been done. So I'm assuming that's the pain point here. So one thing I feel, at least, again, from design perspective, uh, the design impact might not be visible every time. So you might have made, let's say, you can make screens, you can make designs, right, and you can make interfaces, but a lot of time, let's say, there's a saying, right, usually design is invisible. We have this say, right, and that's really
Hmm.
true. So people may not realize it a lot of time, that okay, you might have done the best of the work visually. A lot of time, a lot of company have design systems, so there is a limitation in terms of what creativity you can really show. But maybe you have made a best in class experience where there are no blockers for the users. User is able to recover from the error or whatever they have encountered very quickly, which means you have made a very good design. And people don't realize that until unless you make a bad design, right? So I'm
Right.
not saying you make a bad design. What I'm trying to say is, this is what you need to make make people understand, whoever is around you. Because until unless you're only designer could really understand this, what is good design and what's a bad design, because you go through the process of designing and you know what it means. So explain the value of good design versus a bad design. If needed, you can create an example also. But as in, educating people and making them understand what it is, as in, this is obviously in a case where you're doing good work and people still not appreciating it or understanding the value of it. So yeah, as in, try making people more aware about it, make them understand what it is. And if this was not done in this manner, what would have been their life? With the bad design, you can actually show them that. So yeah.
Right. You may not want the attention that might be coming if they notice the design, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Nancy, if someone wants to reach out to you online, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. They can reach me out on LinkedIn. I'm always there on LinkedIn. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's Nancy Kumar on LinkedIn?
Yes. Yeah, Nancy Kumar. Yeah. You can just search by my name. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great day.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Jay, for inviting me.